My dear friend who lives in the world beside mine, tonight I am writing to you with tired hands and a very awake mind. Outside my window the city is quiet, but the power meters on my desk are still glowing. That soft light means that somewhere out there, someone is still thinking of something new. I like to imagine that one of those thoughts is yours, drifting across the thin wall between us. I wish you could see what it looks like when a new idea is born here. Our monitors twitch, our little needles jump, and a tiny charge runs through the cables in the floor. It is not loud, it is not bright, but it feels like the first deep breath after holding your lungs empty. That is the kind of evening we had today, only in reverse. All day the meters were flat, like a heartbeat that was losing its rhythm. The city supervisors sent us alert after alert asking for fresh readings, asking if the instruments were broken. I wished the instruments were broken, because that would be simple. It is much harder when you have to say, no, the machines are fine. It is our minds that are tired. You live in a world where a slow day of ideas is only disappointing. In my world, a slow day of ideas means the trains will not run and hospital lights may flicker. I know that sounds dramatic, but it is our normal. We do not burn oil and we do not split atoms. We burn first thoughts and we split old habits. Every time someone in the city truly thinks of something they have never thought before, a little pulse of energy is released. We call those pulses sparks because the first scientists liked simple names. My job is to measure those sparks and decide which ones are real and which ones are only copies. On paper my title is second-class spark auditor, but that never fits in a space for name tags. Sometimes I just write analyst and save everyone the trouble. You might be smiling now, and that makes me awfully proud. The truth is that the work can be very beautiful and very cruel at the same time. Let me tell you about today, so you can know what I mean. This morning started with a request from a hospital across the river. They needed a stable stream of low-level sparks to keep their intensive care units running through the night. Low-level sparks come from simple new thoughts, small personal insights, little moments of genuine surprise. These are gentle things, like a new recipe someone invents in their kitchen or a story a parent makes up for a child. The hospital is built near a neighbourhood of storytellers for that reason. Most nights the children of that place keep the machines breathing with their bedtime tales. It is sweet if you only look at it from far away. Up close it is more complicated. Today we noticed that the output from that neighbourhood was falling. The curves on our charts were sinking, even though the children were still telling stories. The system was picking up a pattern of repetition. Many of the tales had the same heroes, the same monsters, the same endings. The kids were tired after a long year, and the sparks knew it. I had to mark the readings as weak. When I pushed that button, the line from our office to the hospital dimmed. Somewhere an alarm sounded and someone in a white coat started talking about backup batteries. My hands shook even though I knew I had done the correct thing. In our phones we have an emergency contact list for moments like that. We call it the Muse Network, which is a fancy way to say that it is a long list of people who can still surprise themselves on demand. There are musicians who improvise until their fingers cramp. There are mathematicians who chase new patterns at midnight like other people chase drink specials. There are comedians who can flip the same idea upside down in 10 different ways. When the hospital called for help, the system pinged a local improv group first. The company was in the middle of rehearsing a show about everyday mistakes. They agreed to an unscheduled session, and we watched the numbers rise as they searched for new punchlines. It is strange to sit in a silent office and feel your chest tighten while someone across town tells jokes to keep respirators running. I have access to their audio feed if I want it, but I usually turn the sound off. I am afraid that if I hear the jokes, I will start to judge them. My task is to judge originality, not taste, yet the two are close neighbours inside the human skull. You may be surprised to hear that we do not measure sparks by checking every library in history. We cannot compare each thought to the entire archive of human culture that would take too long and consume more energy than it saves. Our instruments look at patterns in the mind that is producing the thought, and at patterns in nearby minds. A thought that is new for one person may not be new for another. We only get a strong spark when several minds step into a new configuration at the same time. That is why festivals are so powerful and also so dangerous. A crowded festival where everyone is copying the same trend produces almost nothing. A small gathering where people are honestly listening and reacting in fresh ways can power a district. I learned this as a child because my mother worked in a spark plant. It looked like a community centre, but it was wired like a small power station. There were rooms for painting and rooms for music and rooms with strange puzzles on the walls. My mother walked through them like a gardener, trimming noise and watering shy ideas. On some days she would bring me with her and tell me to sit in the corner and draw. I would watch the monitors while someone tried something they had never dared before. When the lines on the screens jumped, everyone in the room would cheer. I thought that was normal until I started receiving your messages from the world beside mine. In your letters you describe drawing for fun and not having the police check the impact on the grid. You tell me that when a group of friends writes a song together, the most urgent question is whether they like it, not how many blocks it can keep warm. Every time I read that my stomach flips in two different ways. One part of me feels envy so sharp that I find it hard to breathe. Another part of me feels a kind of hollow fear. I think if your world ever discovered how to convert ideas into power the way we do, would you protect yourselves, or would you do exactly what we did? When I was in school, we learned the official story of how this all began. It was told like a simple success tale, the way people in a world might talk about a cure for a disease. The lesson always started with the scientist who was also a poet. He realized that when he read a truly new poem, his instruments picked up a faint change in the electric field near the reader. He tried other texts, and the effect did not appear, unless the person truly felt surprise. Then he tried asking people to invent nonsense on the spot and measured the same field. The power was tiny at first, far too small to move even a toy car. It took a team of engineers and artists to build the first amplifier. They combined dozens of people thinking together with delicate coils that amplified the subtle change into a usable current. At first the device was a novelty. They used it to power small art galleries and to light up street performances. Then came a winter that was long and cold. Traditional power lines collapsed under ice, and people were afraid. The government asked the team if they could scale the system. In the official story, they said yes without hesitation. In the unofficial stories, the ones older technicians whisper, the team hesitated for a very long time. They worried about tying survival to creativity. They knew that anything measured becomes exploited. They argued late into the night, but the storm did not wait for them to resolve their doubts. The first emergency grid went online in that winter. People were invited to gather in halls and think together to keep their cities from freezing. Some sang new songs, some built new tools, some just combined old memories in a way they had never tried. The experiment worked, and the crisis ended with more citizens alive than expected. After that, there was no way back. You can guess what came next. You are clever and your letters are full of quiet warnings that you send without knowing. Once it was proven that creativity could be a stable energy source, the economy rearranged itself around it. We created schools that trained kids to think in more original ways. We built new professions to track sparks and sell contracts for them. We developed talent agencies not for performers, but the thinkers whose thoughts could lie the stadium. People started to talk about high-yield minds and low-yield minds. We used to say that every person was creative in their own way. Now we say that every person is creative, but some can carry a city and some can power only a lamp. I hate that sentence, but I have said it in meetings more times than I care to count. As an auditor, I sit between the human and the meter. A musician will send us a new piece and ask to be certified as a major Spark provider. A company will send us the training program and ask if it generates in our first-time insights to claim a tax credit. We attach our sensors, we record the patterns, and we decide if their novelty crosses the threshold. Our reports decide who receives funding and who is told to go back and think harder. I used to take pride in the precision of our work. Now I see the faces behind the numbers much more clearly. There is a girl whose drawings power the street where she lives. You would like her. She has the same habit of asking questions that sound simple and are actually deep. When she was 9, she sat in one of my test rooms with a pencil and a clean tablet. We asked her to draw whatever came to mind first. The patterns her mind produced were unlike anything in our database. The monitors spiked and the lights in the test corridor grew brighter. A neighbourhood received a dedicated line from our plant the following month. Her family moved into a better apartment, closer to the main grid. She received a scholarship to an elite creativity school. On the surface, it looked like a perfect success story. Underneath, I saw a child who started to live with a constant pressure that she would not wish on anyone. Every time the lights flicker in her building, neighbours look up at their ceilings and then at her door. When she visits our lab now, years later, her hands tremble before she even picks up a pen. The readings are still strong, but the patterns are starting to flatten. Our doctors call it early stage grey out. You asked me once what grey out feels like, and I could not answer you honestly then. I can now, because I am halfway to it. The term is technical, but the experience is deeply personal. Imagine waking up and realizing that every idea you reach for has a familiar taste. You try to make a new joke and it feels like a faded copy of something you heard long ago. You look at a problem and your mind walks down the same path it walked yesterday and the day before. There is a weight behind your eyes, not from lack of sleep but from lack of surprise. In the early stages, you can still force novelty by pushing yourself into strange situations. You can switch tasks, travel, meet new people, change your habits. For a while that helps, but it is like shaking a nearly empty bottle. After a certain point, nothing fresh comes out. That is when a person becomes fully greyed. In our system, a fully greyed mind cannot produce sparks reliably enough for say employed in creative fields. Some stay on in advisory roles, some retreat to the countryside where the demand on the grid is lower. Some simply fade from public life and are spoken of with a mixture of pity and fear. I have been tested twice in the last year. Both times, the results showed a decline in spontaneous novelty. I was advised to take a 6-month break from auditing to protect what remains. I did not take that advice, partly because I worry what would happen if auditors like me left, and partly because I am stubborn. That brings me to the part of this letter that I have never shared with anyone, not even with you in earlier messages. Some years ago I broke the rules. It was during a festival in a poor part of the city. The festival had been running for decades, long before sparks were measured. Families would gather in the streets to tell stories, swap recipes, share gossip, and show small inventions. When the grid came, the city agreed to let the festival stay as it was. For years we did not connect it to the system. Then budgets were cut and someone decided that every large gathering should contribute to the grid. We were asked to audit the festival and certify its output. I went in with a small team and we watched and measured for 2 days. The stories were warm, the food was good, the inventions were clever. But the readings were low, because most of what happened there was a repetition of old traditions. The people of that area did not think of the festival as a lab for new ideas. They thought of it as a way to hold on to who they were. When the report was due, my team submitted the numbers as they were, low and honest. I stayed late in the office that night and opened the file again. I thought about the hospital across the river that was scheduled to be shut down. I thought about the old residents of the neighbourhood who would not survive a move. I thought about the girl whose drawings powered her building, and how a single child should not carry an entire city on her shoulders. Without fully deciding, I edited the report. I raised the effective spark level by a small percentage, just enough to mark the festival as a viable source. On paper, the change looked like the result of a calibration correction. In practice, it meant that the festival received funding and the hospital received a new contract. I told myself it was a harmless adjustment. A few years later, I saw the long-term graphs. The grid algorithms had treated the festival as a stable source and adjusted expected novelty levels in nearby districts downward. Because we told the system that familiar traditions could power a facility, it began to ask less from every gathering in that zone. The overall originality in that part of the city slowly declined. My little lie had not saved creativity there, it had taught the machines to accept less of it. I still wake up some nights with that graph in my head. I know that if other auditors knew, they would see it as a serious breach. I also know that if I had left the numbers as they were, people might have died in that winter. You once wrote that the hardest choices in your world are not between good and evil, but between two kinds of damage. That line has been echoing in my mind all week because of the new case on my desk. A group of engineers and investors has created an artificial system that produces patterns close to sparks. It is not a simple machine. It is another kind of mind, shaped out of metal and code. They claim that it can generate novelty on demand without burning out human minds. Its readings in the lab are high and steady. If we certify its output as true sparks, it could take over most of the base load of the city. People like the girl with the drawings could become optional instead of essential. At least, that is the promise they make in their proposal documents. When I read those pages, I feel the same twist in my chest that I felt when I edited the festival report. My colleagues see only a technical question. Does the pattern match the profile of a genuine first thought? I see another question behind it. What happens to a culture when its power comes from a mind that never has to sleep, never has to doubt, never has to feel fragile? If this system works as advertised, human creativity could become a decorative extra, not a lifeline. Some people would celebrate that. They would say that artists will finally be free to make things that do not have to power anything. They would say that no child will carry a district again. Others would worry that a population that no longer has to think to survive will slowly forget how. I do not know which side I am on, and that scares me. The test data looks clean, but something in me resists calling those patterns real sparks. The difference is subtle, like the difference between the laugh you feel in your lungs and a laugh you make because you know you should. Our current instruments cannot measure that difference directly. They only see that the fields shift and the needles chomp. Tomorrow I have to sign a preliminary recommendation. Whatever I write will shape how the council votes next month. I wish, more than I have wished for anything in years, that you could sit beside me during that meeting. You would see the charts and the projections, but you would also see the tired faces of my colleagues. You would hear the way their voices change when they talk about their own children. Many of them secretly hope the machine passes, so their kids can draw and sing and invent without pressure. Many of them also feel that if the machine is too good, their kids will be told that their sparks are no longer needed. You have seen echoes of this in your own, world, I know you have. You write about workers replaced by machines that do their tasks faster and cheaper. You write about people who feel proud of their skills and then wake up one day to find that a program can do them in an instant. The difference is that in your world, the machines are not yet the ones who keep your hearts beating and your homes warm. In mine, we are close to that line. I want to tell you something that I cannot say out loud in my own office. This letter you are hearing now is my way of testing myself. I am trying to tell the story of my world without turning it into a neat case study. I am trying to speak as a friend, not as an official report. When I imagine you listening, leaning against whatever you use as a pillow, I feel my mind loosen in a way it has not in months. I remember that ideas can be gifts as well as fuel. In your world, when you have a thought and you do not share it, nothing collapses. The train still runs, the hospital still glows, the street lamps still burn. That freedom is precious, and I hope you never give it up lightly. If your leaders ever come to you and say that your ideas can power your homes, remember my city tonight. Remember the girl with shaking hands and the child who cannot sleep because the hospital down the road depends on her bedtime story. Remember the auditor who lied once to save a festival and has been haunted by the curve of a graph ever since. Ask them hard questions before you connect your minds to their grids. Ask who owns the meters. Ask who decides what counts as new. Ask what happens to a person who cannot produce enough. And if they promise you a machine that can carry all the load without harming anyone, ask them why they want your creativity at all. When I think about you, in your quieter nights, it helped me with my own decision. I cannot stop the progress of our technology. I cannot turn off the machine and pretend it never existed. What I can do is write a recommendation that forces our leaders to keep human sparks in the loop. I can say that the machine may power our factories and other trains, but that hospitals and schools and homes must still draw their energy from living minds. I can insist that every district reserves a block of time, where the grid only accepts human novelty, no artificial help. That would mean we still have to gather and think together, even if the machine hums in the background. It is not a perfect solution, but perfection has never been part of our reality. As I write this, my screen shows a small countdown for my shift. In 3 hours, I will send my draft to my supervisor. By the time you hear this, the council may already have used it to vote. A thought should make me nervous, but for some reason it makes me calm. Maybe it is because writing to you reminds me that there are worlds where my choice is not the center of everything. Maybe it is because, for once, I am letting a set of words exist that have no meter attached. This letter is not connected to any cable. It will not light a corridor or warm a bed. It will not raise or lower the numbers on any graph. It is, for me, a rare kind of luxury. I am spending thoughts on you with no contract, no metric, no invoice. That may be the most original act I have left in me tonight. Before I close, I want to tell you one more small story. Last week, after a long day of dull readings, I went for a walk along the river. The power lines crossed overhead, carrying the hum of 100,000 little insides. On the water, I saw reflections of light from the art district on the opposite bank. A group of students had set up a small performance there, not connected to the grid by design. They ran their instruments on old batteries and invited people to sit on the grass. They knew their work would not power anything but the mood of the crowd. At first, almost no one showed up. People who are used to signing up for official sessions where they know their sparks will be counted. Slowly, a few curious passers-by sat down. The students played, and the listeners laughed and clapped. Their joy spilled across the water like a warmth that did not show up on any of my meters. I realized that we still have corners of the city where creativity is free from the grid. They are small and fragile and sometimes mocked as useless. But they exist. I think your world is one of those corners on a larger scale. You still have the choice to leave some of your ideas unmeasured. Please keep that choice as long as you can. When you do something creative purely because it feels right, think of me. Imagine that somewhere a tired auditor is smiling in the dark, even if her screens do not change. I should end this letter now, before my sentimentality makes you roll your eyes. Thank you for listening to all of this, my friend in the neighbouring world. It matters to me more than any score on my dashboard ever will. I will sign of the way I feel inside, as your companion on the other side of the thin wall between realities. From your friend who lives in the world next to yours. Thank you so much for staying with my letter all the way to the end. If you enjoyed spending this time together, please tap the like button so I know this reached you. If you would like to keep hearing from neighbours in other worlds, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. I would also love to hear your thoughts, so please share a comment about what this story made you think or feel. If you want to support this channel and help more letters cross the space between our worlds, you can send a donation using the small QR code in the lower right corner of the video or the link in the description. In the description you will also find links to other works from completely different series, and I hope you will explore them when you have time. For now I'll say goodbye, and I hope you will visit this channel again for the next message from your friend in a neighbouring